close your eyes. Now imagine textures you can see, colors you can feel. Sounds harmless? Think again. One procedure changed everything, opening a portal to a horror beyond comprehension. Are you brave enough to listen? Hit subscribe and like to join us in the shadows. Before I delve into what's been happening, there are adjustments you need to make to your understanding. Firstly, perception isn't fixed. I know that sounds trite, some new age drivel, but it's fundamental. I experience the world differently. I have a rare form of synesthesia, primarily visual tactile. Think of it as seeing textures, feeling colors. For most of my life, it was manageable, even interesting. Red was rough like sandpaper, the note of C-sharp tasted like cold steel. And grief was a suffocating, viscous black fog that clung to the air. It was manageable, I stress, until the procedure. A minor surgery, they called it. Corrective, routine. Now the synesthesia is amplified, aggressive. The world is a cacophony of clashing senses, a brutal assault. Secondly, and this is crucial, reality is malleable. I know, another cliche, but bear with me. What you perceive as solid, immutable, I'm starting to see vibrate, shift. The edges blur. And with my enhanced senses, well, let's just say the fabric of what we call real is thinner than you think. Much thinner. Thirdly, and this is the crux of it, what I'm about to describe started after the surgery. Before, the synesthesia was a filter, a lens. Now, it's a portal. I blame the doctors, of course. They poked and prodded, and now things are leaking through. Before, a discordant chord might feel like a shiver down my spine. Now, discordant chords, well, you'll see. Finally, and this is why I'm writing this down, I'm not sure how much time I have left. The changes are accelerating. I need to document this, to get it out there, even if it sounds like madness. Especially if it sounds like madness. Perhaps someone, somewhere, will understand. Perhaps someone can help. Though, increasingly, I doubt it. It began subtly, a week after the surgery. I was in my apartment, a small, cluttered space I'd always found comforting. The beige walls were usually a smooth, neutral hum to my senses, a soft, almost velvety texture. But that day they rippled. Just a faint undulation, like heat rising from asphalt. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Gone. Must be tired, I thought. Post-operative fatigue. The next day it was worse. The beige wasn't velvety anymore. It was granular, like rough plaster, and the ripples were more pronounced, almost organic, like skin crawling. The texture of the air itself felt thicker, heavier, pressing in on me. The scent of dust, usually a faint, dry whisper, was now a choking cloud of grit in my nostrils, each particle a tiny, abrasive shard. I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it. Side effects of the anesthesia, perhaps? Lingering effects of the surgery? I called the doctor. Routine post-op check, they said. Everything was normal. But normal didn't account for the growing unease, the feeling that my apartment, my sanctuary, was unraveling. The sound started to distort too. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, usually a low, comforting drone, became a guttural growl vibrating deep in my chest. The ticking of the clock was no longer rhythmic. It was erratic, frantic, each tick a sharp, stabbing pain behind my eyes. Music was unbearable. A simple melody became a jarring, discordant mess, each note a physical blow, colors clashing violently in my vision, textures grating against my skin. Then came the shadows. Not just shadows, but textured shadows. The shadow of the lamp on the wall wasn't just darkness. It was a dense, velvety blackness that seemed to absorb light, to suck the color from the room. And it moved, subtly at first, flickering at the edges like something breathing just beyond the veil of perception. One evening, I was sitting in my armchair trying to read. The book felt wrong. The paper was no longer smooth. It was slick, almost wet, and the ink seemed to writhe on the page, the letters twisting into grotesque shapes. The words themselves tasted metallic, bitter, like poison on my tongue. I slammed the book shut, throwing it onto the floor. That's when I saw it properly. The shadow in the corner of the room, the one cast by the coat stand, wasn't just flickering anymore. It was lengthening, solidifying. The velvety blackness was taking shape. It stretched, unfolded, and resolved itself into a figure. Tall, gaunt, impossibly thin, like a starved scarecrow draped in black velvet. Its head was featureless, a smooth, dark oval, but where its eyes should have been, there were holes. Not empty sockets, but holes that seemed to bore into nothingness, into an absence of light and space. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Not the usual fear, the jump scare fright. This was primal, visceral terror, the kind that claws at your insides and freezes your blood. I wanted to scream, but my throat constricted, no sound escaping. I wanted to run, but my limbs were leaden, unresponsive. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, emanating a cold, silent dread that filled the room, suffocating me more effectively than any black fog. The air around it shimmered, distorted, as if the very fabric of reality was warping in its presence. The beige walls pulsed with a sickening fleshy rhythm, and the growl of the refrigerator deepened into a monstrous subterranean rumble. Then it tilted its head. Just a fraction, but enough. And from the featureless oval of its head, a sound emerged. Not a voice, not exactly. More like texture. A grating, rasping sensation like sandpaper dragged across bone, but auditory. It vibrated through me, not just in my ears, but in my teeth, in my bones. A physical assault of sound. And with that sound, the room shifted. The beige walls didn't just pulse, they bulged, softened, becoming flesh. Raw, pink, glistening flesh, veined with throbbing blue lines. The floor beneath my feet wasn't carpet anymore. It was yielding, spongy, like walking on wet muscle. The air thickened further, becoming viscous, heavy with the cloying sweetness of decay. The scent of dust was gone, replaced by a metallic tang, the coppery stench of blood and something else, something organic, rotting. The figure remained, a silent sentinel in this grotesque transformation. Its presence was a catalyst, a focal point for the unraveling of reality. And the sound, that rasping, bone-grating sound, it was words. Not comprehensible words, not at first. But as the room twisted and wreathed, the sound sharpened, clarified, forming into something intelligible. "We see you," it grated. The sound tearing at my eardrums, vibrating in my skull. "We feel you." The words were not just heard, they were felt. A cold, probing touch, like icy fingers tracing the contours of my soul. A violation, intimate and profound. I finally managed to scream, a choked, desperate sound lost in the growing clamor. I squeezed my eyes shut, clamped my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sensory onslaught. But it was no use. The horror wasn't external anymore. It was inside me, woven into my senses, a fundamental part of my perception. The synesthesia, once a quirky filter, was now a conduit, a gateway to this. When I dared to open my eyes again, the figure was closer, much closer. It stood just inches away, the featureless oval of its head looming over me. The holes where its eyes should be seemed to deepen, to widen, sucking in not just light, but everything. My vision, my sanity, my very self. "We are you." The grating voice rasped closer now, the sound resonating in my chest cavity. "You are us." The fleshy walls pulsed around me, throbbing in time with the guttural rumble of the refrigerator monster. The floor squelched beneath my feet, and the air was thick with the stench of decay and blood. And the figure, the velvet scarecrow, was reaching out. Long, skeletal fingers, tipped with claws that shimmered with a dark, oily sheen, extended towards me. I flinched back, scrambling away, tripping over the spongy floor, falling onto the pulsating flesh of the wall. It yielded, soft and wet beneath my touch. I recoiled, gagging at the texture, the smell, the sheer wrongness of it all. No, I managed to croak, my voice a thin, reedy whisper against the monstrous symphony of senses. No, get away. The figure didn't stop. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its skeletal limbs unfolding, extending, reaching. The holes in its head seemed to widen further, drawing me in, promising oblivion, promising assimilation. Escape is futile, the voice grated. The texture of sound now a physical pressure, crushing my ribs, squeezing the air from my lungs. We are one now. Desperation surged through me, overriding the fear, the paralysis. I had to escape, not just the room, but this sensory nightmare, this encroaching madness. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the squelching floor, the pulsating walls, the suffocating air. I stumbled towards the door, or where the door should have been. Now, it was just another sphincter in the fleshy wall, a gaping maw of raw pink tissue. I reached for the doorknob, or what I thought was the doorknob. My hand plunged into the yielding flesh, sinking into the warm, wet substance. The flesh tightened around my wrist, constricting, pulling me in. Pain shot up my arm, sharp and burning, as the fleshy walls clamped down. Panic flared. I thrashed, pulling back, but the flesh held fast, like a living vice. The figure glided closer, its featureless head tilting, the holes boring into me. The rasping voice echoed in the fleshy tunnel, a promise of inescapable horror. Surrender, it grated. Become part of us. Then, a sound, a sharp, jarring sound that cut through the monstrous symphony, a sound of normality. The insistent, shrill ringing of my alarm clock. I gasped, my eyes snapping open. Darkness, but not the velvety textured darkness of the shadow figure. Just darkness. My bedroom. The familiar shapes of furniture looming in the gloom. The rhythmic ticking of the clock, blessedly normal, blessedly mundane. The faint hum of the refrigerator, a comforting drone in the silence. I fumbled for the lamp, switched it on, beige walls, cluttered room, everything. Normal. Except my heart hammered in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. My skin was clammy, cold sweat plastering my clothes to my body. My arm throbbed, a phantom pain where the fleshy wall had constricted. And the air still felt thick, heavier. The scent of dust was still tinged with a metallic tang. It was just a dream, I told myself, forcing the words past my constricted throat. Just a nightmare, a vivid hallucination brought on by the surgery, the synesthesia, the stress. Just a dream. But even as I said the words, I knew it wasn't true. The fear lingered, cold and sharp, a residue of something profoundly real. The textures of the room, though visually normal, still felt off. The beige walls still had a faint, granular quality. The air still pressed in. The sound still vibrated with an undercurrent of discord. And in the corner of the room, where the coat stand cast its shadow, there was a patch of darkness that seemed deeper than the rest. A patch of velvety blackness that seemed to breathe. Desperation, sharp and insistent, was starting to override the fear. I was out of food, truly out. The canned goods in my pantries seemed to mock me. Each label a potential lie, each can a possible vessel of something unimaginable. Starvation, however, was a more immediate and tangible threat than whatever horrors awaited me outside. I had to try. I had to get to the store. I told myself it would be quick. A fast trip to the corner market, grab a few things. Sealed packages of crackers were the limit of my courage, and then back home. Home was safer, or at least it felt that way for now. I clung to the idea of safety, repeating it in my head like a ward against the darkness. Taking a deep breath, I opened my apartment door. The hallway was almost normal. A flicker of fragile hope sparked within me. The beige walls, while still faintly grainy to my senses, seemed less aggressive. The air, though still heavy, felt a fraction lighter. Perhaps, just perhaps, the worst was receding. Maybe the medications, even if they felt useless, were finally starting to have some effect. I was a fool. The moment I stepped out onto the street, the world seemed to subtly crack. It wasn't a violent shattering, but a slow, insidious distortion, like a photograph left too long in the sun, the colors bleeding and running. The sunlight, usually a neutral presence, became harsh, almost abrasive, each ray feeling like a pinprick on my skin. The air, which had felt almost breathable in the hallway, thickened, becoming cloying, sweet, in a way that was deeply unsettling, laced with a faint metallic tang that made my stomach churn. The familiar street warped. The asphalt seemed to undulate, the neat lines of the sidewalk dissolving into uneven, fleshy ridges. The buildings across the street seemed to list and sway, their windows becoming not just dark, but actively void, sucking in the light around them. Even the sky, the usually indifferent blue sky, seemed to churn with a sickly, bruised green hue. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at my throat. But I forced myself onward. Food. I needed food. The corner store was just a block away. I focused on that single mundane goal, trying to anchor myself to something, anything, that felt remotely real. The bell above the store door jingled as I entered, the sound unpleasantly loud, sharp, almost painful, echoing in my ears. The fluorescent lights inside were brutal, glaring down from the ceiling, reflecting off every surface in a harsh, unforgiving way. They seemed to press down on me, heavy and oppressive, making my vision swim at the edges. Muzak, some generic pop song, drifted from hidden speakers, but it was no longer music. It was a discordant, clashing mess of sounds, each instrument vying for dominance, creating a sickening, overwhelming roar. The violin screeched, the bass throbbed like a diseased heartbeat, and the percussion hammered relentlessly, each beat a jarring physical sensation. The tiled floor beneath my feet was wrong. It wasn't quite tile anymore. It felt uneven, yielding, almost spongy underfoot, like walking on some kind of damp, unnatural surface. I could sense a faint, unsettling give with each step, a texture that was both soft and disturbingly organic. I moved down the aisles, past shelves packed with things. Were they food? The brightly colored packaging seemed to writhe and shift, the familiar logos blurring into illegible shapes, unsettling symbols that I couldn't quite decipher. The cheerful cartoon characters on cereal boxes seemed to leer, their smiles too wide, too fixed, their eyes unsettlingly vacant. Even the textures of the boxes seemed to change, the smooth cardboard feeling strangely porous, almost fleshy. Canned goods lined an entire wall, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Rows and rows of metallic cylinders, reflecting the distorted light in a sickening way. I hesitantly reached out towards a can, peaches I thought, or maybe it was supposed to be. The label was a swirling mess of color and shape, utterly unreadable. My fingers brushed against the cold metal, and I recoiled instinctively. It wasn't just cold, it was clammy, slick, with a faint, unpleasant give, like touching something dead. The metal itself felt wrong, subtly porous, almost breathing. And the other shoppers, drifting through the aisles, they were changing too. Subtly at first, almost imperceptibly. Faces seemed blurred, indistinct, features shifting and sliding, like clay being remolded by unseen hands. Voices, once normal, now seemed muted, indistinct, devolving into rasping whispers or guttural noises that barely registered as human. A woman pushing a shopping cart passed by, her face strangely faded, almost translucent, her eyes two dark, empty sockets that seemed to stare directly through me. A young man reached for a loaf of bread, and for a fleeting moment, his hand seemed elongated, skeletal, the skin stretched taut and thin over bone. I couldn't breathe. The cloying, sweet, metallic stench of decay was overwhelming now, filling my nostrils, coating my tongue with a taste that was both sickly sweet and faintly metallic, making me gag. The pulsating floor, the fleshy walls, the screeching music, the brutal glare of the lights, the things that were once people, it was all too much. I turned and fled, blindly bolting back down the aisle, ignoring the squelching floor, the pulsing walls, the assault on my senses. I didn't grab anything, no crackers, no food, nothing. Just escape. Back through the jarring, clanging door, back out onto the street, which, while still distorted, felt almost normal in comparison to the horrors inside. I ran back towards the perceived safety of my apartment, empty-handed and consumed by a deeper, more profound terror than before. The horror wasn't just in my head anymore. It was everywhere. And it was hungry. I'm still here in my apartment. The days have passed, blurring into a continuous cycle of waking terror and uneasy, dream-haunted sleep. The transformations are happening more frequently now, lasting longer. The figure appears more often, its presence growing stronger, its voice more insistent. The boundaries between dream and reality are dissolving, the veil thinning to nothing. I don't know how much longer I can hold on to normal. I don't know how much longer normal will even exist. The synesthesia is no longer just a filter, it's a doorway. And something is coming through. Something that sees me, feels me, and wants to become me. They are in me now, and I am in them. Neither can escape, and I can't stop them now. I think they are waiting for me to fully surrender, to become one of them. And I'm starting to wonder if resistance is truly possible or even desirable. The fear is still there, yes, but beneath it, a strange curiosity is growing. What is it like on the other side? What is it like to be one of them? Perhaps soon I will know, and perhaps then I will finally understand what reality truly means. Or perhaps understanding will cease to matter altogether. Perhaps soon there will only be us.